Great, so we're going to make a start. So welcome to everybody, and those of you that come straight from the keynote, or those that are new to joining us. So this is day one of the GWT conference, and we've just had a great keynote speech from Leng Tang from Singapore. So I hope you're enjoying it. She's kicked things off really, really well. Just to point out, just to reiterate Graham's conversation around some Zoom housekeeping, if everybody's happy to stay on mute, that would keep the background noise down. We're going to record it. What will happen is all of the webinars will be recorded and added onto the GWT website under the news section. So when you click on the website, then click on news, and then everything will be under the 2022 virtual conference, along with the slides, I believe, as well. So you'll be able to watch the things then that are going on at the same time as this one. I'm joined here with Denise, who's going to run the IT and run the chat room. So if you've got any burning questions, please pop them into chat, and then Denise will make sure that we pick those up and answer those at the end. And I'm sharing this webinar with Judith, who's been frantically busy and has just virtually run in and sat down. So we're going to give her some time to gather herself, and she can introduce herself in a minute. So my name is Lorraine George, and I'm the Learning and Development Officer for GWT. And I wear a couple of different intergenerational hats. So I come from a local authority background in Torbay in Devon, where I developed the early years intergenerational programme, but I'm fundamentally an early years practitioner, and have been for 20 years, and then for 13 of those within an advisory capacity training and developing intergenerational work in the community. I'm also a Winston Churchill Fellow, and was funded by the Winston Churchill Memorial Trust to travel to America and research and find out more around the intergenerational co-located sites that are in the US, and then challenged to come back and make a difference. And then I joined GWT in October. Judith, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hello, so I'm Judith Ish-Horowicz, and having had quite a number of years of occasional visits from my nursery Apples and Honey in Wimbledon with a care home in South London, I opened Apples and Honey Nightingale, an intergenerational nursery co-located on the site of the care home. And it's been amazing, the experience of not only getting it up and running and having the experience and meeting so many fantastic intergenerational practitioners on the way, but having to actually adapt my program and learn how to cope with keeping those intergenerational programs during COVID, which we did manage somehow, and managed to keep together and keep those relationships going. And it's lovely to be able to share a platform with Lorraine about the importance, the value, and the excitement of actually professional development, and just how important that is in this field.
Lovely, thanks Judith. Right, I'm just going to share some slides. There we go. Can everybody see those? Are those up? Brilliant. Right. So the focus of this website is this webinar is very much around how can we upskill ourselves. I know as an intergenerational practitioner, I felt very much that I was a lone voice in my local authority, sort of banging the intergenerational drum and not getting a really good reception or a lot of attention. And there doesn't seem to be a lot of, because it's such a new field, there doesn't seem to be a lot of guidance in terms of what pathway do you follow, how can I become better and offer better quality and know that I'm able to assess that quality within what we're doing. From everybody that's in this website is basically from a different field, from a different profession, from a different organization. And I've tried to capture actually how can we start to work together cross professions in terms of building sort of a platform of good practice. So let me start with, so the focus really of this session is to sort of explore what does good practice look like? And these are conversations I'm having now with the Care Inspectorate, the regulators of early years and elder care in Scotland, how it can be used as an approach across the whole of society, benefits, the pathways we can follow, what we can do ourselves as practitioners in upskilling and sourcing really relevant information that we can use to build good and best practice. And then what training opportunities are we doing that, what can we do as part of that? So first of all, I just wanted to have a common understanding around actually the definition of intergenerational practice. And this is the definition that comes from Beth Johnson Foundation, which is one that Generations Working Together endorse. So it's around intergenerational practices, around aiming to bring people together in purposeful, mutually beneficial activities which promote greater understanding and respect between generations and contributes to building a more cohesive community. And I think it's important that as practitioners, not only that we're aware of that difference between multi-generational and intergenerational practice, but actually we can articulate that when people want to know the difference, or maybe when we're supporting other people to understand that difference. And it may be that as part of your job role, you're doing some sort of hand-holding around taking people from working at a multi-generational level to an intergenerational level. And how can you do that without losing people on the way and without maybe scaring them off around talking about words like evaluation, which people can often find quite scary. But it is important as practitioners that we understand and know the difference and are able to sort of spot when something is done to one generation rather than it's being done in shared ownership. And that's really important. So this is the definition that I'm working with today. And when I'm talking about intergenerational practice, I'm talking about all the different projects, activities, events where people of different generations are being brought together who otherwise may not have had that connection. I'm always mindful that the activity, the project, the event is a tool in which we're using to bring people together. And actually, we're not really focused on necessarily on the activity event itself, but what we're focusing on as intergenerational practitioners is what relationships happen, how can I support engagement, how can I comment commonalities, differences, because it's not always things that we have in common with people that help us to forge friendships. Sometimes it's the exact opposite. It's because we're so different that we form a friendship with people. So it's important to understand that an intergenerational approach has principles that embed it. It should be mutually beneficial. As part of that process, it needs to challenge ageism, stereotypes, and misconceptions. And it supports children to understand and value diversity and difference, particularly young children, when we're able to capture those moments of empathy and create a learning opportunity from them. And that it's asset-based. So we're building on those positive resources that each generation has and bringing them together so they can offer them to each other and learn from each other as part of lifelong learning. So as with all types of practice, whether it's teaching or nursing or social work, they all have principles that underlie and pedagogy that underlie the actual practice itself that you want to see embedded in the practice as part of best practice. So for me, these are very much around that they're mutual and reciprocal, that everybody has equal participation. And I think this is key for me as an early years practitioner, when we're maybe not just choosing the children we know that are going to behave, or maybe equally from a social care setting, you're maybe going to choose adults whose behavior may be more predictable than others, but that everybody has an opportunity to participate equally. And we're using their strengths, their interests to bring people together. That it's well planned. And when I say well planned, I mean that all the stakeholders, the participants have been involved in the planning from the very beginning. And because they've been involved with it from the beginning, they've owned it. It's culturally grounded, it's relevant to their community because they've chosen the event or the activity it is that you want, that they want to see explored through an intergenerational approach. It strengthens community bonds, and by doing so promotes active citizenship. And that might be with children and young people becoming volunteers, or equally it might be older adults becoming volunteers within education. As part of that process, it challenges ageism, and it's also cross-disciplinary. And that is really important. And that is probably one of the things that is the hardest to achieve as a new field of learning, is how do we start working outside our own silos and work and engage with other disciplines. Now, Judith and I have only got sort of under an hour, so we're not going to go into a lot of detail around benefits. So this is very much a summary, and you know, it could easily be a whole day training and discussion. So in terms for older adults, it can be around that increased socialization and engagement, that greater sense of well-being, increased physical activity, reduced loneliness and isolation. And this isn't necessarily older adults in residential care. They could be older adults within their community. Equally, for children and young people, loneliness and isolation is really key and is a real problem. So we'd see an impact on that, improved social skills. For early years children, particularly, huge improvements in language and communication, and that development of empathy, which I've already mentioned. The more empathetic we can support children in becoming, the more it benefits their wider learning, because they feel supported, they feel that they're surrounded by champions, and then they feel better able to take risks in their learning. And it also applies to young people as well, with regards to mentoring, having somebody maybe to support them around job applications, or writing for jobs, writing their dissertations. It also has wider implications, and this is something that as practitioners we should be more informed about, in terms of it's not just the immediate participants that benefit from intergenerational work. So for me, visiting the places I visited in America, there were places in America that had developed their intergenerational programs and found that it not only attracted new staff, but the staff that were there stayed, the staff retained, they didn't want to move. That improved morale, it increased the level of practice. They were offered better care because the staff continually built on existing training. You weren't always replacing and training new staff every 6 months. And because of that, it's a better working environment. It also, I have found, certainly in all the years I've been doing intergenerational work, I have loved how intergenerational work ripples into the community. It doesn't happen in isolation. It doesn't stay just with the participants. You have children that then drag their parents in to visit residents, maybe in a care home during the holidays. Equally, you have children that make their parents visit in the summer holidays from school because they've missed seeing and having that contact with a friend that they were seeing every week. It also, by virtue of that, brings community, particularly into residential care, and that in turn improves that transparency in practice, because you've got more people out of the social care environment coming into the care home. There are more opportunities for generations to meet and learn from each other, which in turn challenges ageism. And there is a real need to do this. We live now within a very age-segregated society, particularly in the UK. Our families have less opportunities now to meet with extended family. We tend to be more geographically distant. So therefore, our children tend to have less immediate contact and experience with all the different ranges of people that make up part of our family, whether it's cousins or aunties and uncles and grandparents and great-grandparents even. Rarely do people have grandparents living in their home, and people tend to be very time poor, and there is that pressure of work and trying to balance some sort of life alongside that. So there are very few, very few experiences that our children have that are specifically intergenerational. They tend to very much stay, as we all do, regardless of our age, with similarly aged people. We don't tend to have those community opportunities that we can meet or bump into people of different generations. So I had a look at all the people that had booked onto this, and I tried to map out pretty much everybody's background. And I think it really symbolises the wide-ranging aspect of how intergenerational work is being used and the people that are interested in it, but also the difficulties that come from so many different professions being involved. So, for example, you may be a volunteer or a member of a charity, and it might be that you're turning to intergenerational work because you're maybe doing work with refugees, for example. You might be in housing, and you could be an architect planning intergenerational spaces in a retirement village, or you could be a housing planner in a local authority. You could come from the world of academia as a student, as a professor, or even as a researcher. And there are a growing number now of researchers that are just focusing on intergenerational work, which is great because it gives them that real in-depth knowledge of what you're aspiring to do, and then being able to give that impartial view as to whether your outcomes and aims have been reached. You might be part of a local authority, like I was as a development worker, or social care at whatever level, grassroots level or senior management. You might be in education, so that might be early years or primary or secondary. You might be a childminder or a teacher. Equally, your work may be community-based, and that might be around asset building within community. It might be around social prescribing, or you might be a development worker. And then you might be in health and social care. So you could be the owner of a care home, or the manager, or the activity provider that has an interest and has seen the impact of intergenerational work. And then I put in other, in case there is somebody I've missed, which I'm sure there is. But I think really, for me, this really indicates the benefits of and the wonders of doing intergenerational work, in that it's so far-ranging, but equally the difficulties that may come from that. So, for example, our work tends to be, bear with me a second, so our work tends to be very siloed. And certainly I know when I worked in a local authority, there was very little time, very little opportunity to work across teams. And when we started developing intergenerational, an early years intergenerational programme in 2017, it was very strange and had quite a lot of resistance around working with a different team in adult social care, both at a senior management level and grassroots level, and we're having conversations with those colleagues who firmly believed that early years children did not belong in care homes, and it was a real journey and it was a real challenge. And I think knowing that our work is all now so siloed and everybody is now so head down and driven, and we're overwhelmed with emails, and with all of that, it can be very difficult now to find the time and ring fence those opportunities to work and to contact and have those initial conversations with people who work in other departments or other organisations. Being a lone worker also then often means that there's repetition of similar projects. It could be that you're developing something with primary school children in one area of your local authority, and actually there's a very similar community project that's being developed that you don't know anything about. And if only you'd known about it, you could have maybe worked together and increased the reach. Often, because we're all doing very similar projects, it then impacts on the amount of funding that's available. There's less funding and very much lack of directed money. So a lot of funding bodies aren't specifically offering money. There's very few that offer specific money for intergenerational work, which means we tend to be all chasing the same community action funds, which tend to get harder and harder, more competitive, and with more work attached to them. It can be equally very frustrating and exhausting being that lone voice, being the only person trying to raise awareness about intergenerational work and the impact it has. And that can be exhausting. And because we're one voice, it often means there's less research and less evidence. Although there is a growing amount, if you took intergenerational research now as one bank of evidence and information to look at, it is absolutely growing. We could do so much more if we started to work across organisations and across disciplines. The smaller amount of research then means there's little joined up knowledge of benefits, and that's really important. We don't know, or what we learn then isn't shared with other people, especially if you're using a targeted approach. So for example, if your intergenerational project is targeted at school readiness or improving literacy or getting 16-year-olds into work and education, unless you're sharing that in a much more joined up way, it really has an impact on the amount of, on the benefits that it potentially could have. So what can we do, and how can we actually change and work as a more joined up, unified group of intergenerational practitioners? And the first thing for me, and I'm going to explore these in the next few slides, is we need to get better at challenging the narrative. Often when you read about intergenerational work, either in the press, or if you see it on television, or if it's on social media, it tends to be early years and childcare. There's very little around maybe mentoring or getting children into education. So it tends to be the cute, lovely stuff that is absolutely heartwarming, absolutely, and wonderful, definitely. But equally, we need to inform ourselves about the wide range of other uses for intergenerational work so that we're able to actually offer that within the conversation, so that we're not always just looking for funding just for early years and older adults. It's also around how can we sort of shift that perception that actually I can use this as a targeted approach, therefore this is why it's worth investing the money, because this is the impact it can have. The other thing we need to be doing as practitioners is improving our knowledge. Now, you know, we're all at very different stages, I would imagine. We're all in different occupations and professions, and some of us may just be developing and just starting our intergenerational journey, whereas others may be 4 or 5 or more years in. But we need to certainly increase the amount of knowledge that we hold, so that when we're talking about intergenerational work, we're able to talk about quality standards and the different levels and the amount of research, and be able to direct people and have those professional cross-disciplinary conversations. For me, coming from an early years background, it's so important to embed quality and to have an understanding of what quality looks like within the intergenerational work that we do. And we can only do that if we actually are aware of the existing quality standards and we are able to pull out something as an example of what makes this intergenerational or multi-generational. So again, it's around, do you know what the quality standards are? What do they look like, and how can you embed them within your practice? And then really importantly, I think evaluation is something that generally most people tend to shy away from. And I think there's lots of reasons for that. I think initially, because often it's left to the end. I think also as well, people don't feel confident and they always feel that evaluation should be outsourced, and you can only evaluate if you can find a certain amount of money from a funder to pay for an external evaluation. But actually, when you think as practitioners, we have so much knowledge about the people that we're working with, whether that's as an early years practitioner about the children, or a teacher, or an activity provider in a care home, or a youth worker with children, with young people. We are the people that know and recognise when that person really starts to see a benefit from the evaluation project. Are they talking more? Are they more physically active? Are they more confident? So we need to build our own confidence in actually what does that evaluation look like, and how can we acquaint ourselves with the different range of skills in order to start evaluating and sharing our own work, because that's what we should do. We need to own it as part of the intergenerational process. So the first thing, and I'm just going to look at these four in a little bit more detail around changing the narrative. So is your work multi-generational or intergenerational? And do you know the difference? Talking more around it being just not early years. It's not just a lovely thing to do. We should be doing it because it makes a difference. And the difference can be huge and should be used as a targeted approach. We can really improve children's speech and language, involving them in intergenerational work. We can absolutely improve children's keenness to engage in education and work if we mentor and support them. So we really need to have that wider understanding. Evaluating and collecting evidence to support the claim, really crucial. And sharing it, what's the point of evaluating it if you then don't share it? Where can you post it? Who can you share it with in your organisation? Who can you share it with outside of your organisation? And what diverse partnerships can you develop to start to work across different types of working? This does not want to, there we go. So how can we increase our knowledge? Now, I mentioned before that I'm the Learning and Development Officer for GWT. So for me, it seems strange, but actually I work for GWT, who are based in Scotland, but I actually live in England, and I travel up and deliver training in Scotland. But for me, for those of you that work in Scotland, join WT because it's free. It offers so much support, training opportunities, that this would be my first port of call. You can also join GWT as an international member and access exactly the same things through there. So in terms of training, what training is there? So within GWT, within the website, there are 5 online introductory modules to intergenerational work, which cover evaluation and impact, which was written by Ali Summers. It's a really, really excellent module. It explores planning intergenerational projects. It explores how you can challenge ageism within intergenerational work. So there's 5 that you can all complete through independent study, and each one takes 2 to 3 hours. We also offer a one-day intergenerational training course, and that will remain in 2022 as blended learning. So we're doing the one day online, but also from April onwards, we're out and about across Scotland delivering face-to-face training. And this is training that will support your understanding of what should intergenerational learning projects, what should they consist of, and also how do you plan them? How do you work with other partners within the community? And then lastly, GWT offer an 8-week diploma, which really gives you that wider informed overview of intergenerational work across all the different fields. And the last module focuses on evaluation, and you'll come away with some really great evaluative tools that will build your confidence as practitioners in evaluating your own. So don't think just because I can't evaluate it and I can't find funding for it doesn't mean you can't evaluate it. You can also join a supportive network of colleagues. So GWT has 18 geographical networks, and it also has 5 thematic networks. So I lead on the network for care homes. So it might be that your care home owner, manager, activity provider Every network has 3 meetings a year, 2 online, and then 1 face-to-face somewhere within Scotland. So you have that opportunity then linking in with other colleagues, and I found that really useful. I know Judith was one of the first people I met with, you know, and I went and visited Apple and Honey twice, I think. So, you know, because it just really inspired and motivated me. And she had answers to all of the questions that I was maybe too frightened to ask online because somebody felt that I should know them. So it's really important to have that supportive network of colleagues, you know, and to start creating your own networks. Equally, you need to be informed, and on the GWT website there's a huge range of case studies and research that you can filter out depending on the theme that you're looking for. Use the case studies not only to inform yourself about similar projects maybe that you could run in your care home, because none of us have got the time now to reinvent the wheel. But also as well, it will give you those facts and information that you can then maybe use to attach to a funding bid, or to start those conversations within your own organisations about working in partnership. So the case studies are really valuable, and they'll also have, this time next year, you'll also have the case studies of the people that have received the Excellence Awards today, and that's always great to sort of link up with. Learning about the intergenerational standards is so important. You know, you need to be aware of them, you need to know what they look like, and you need to be able to pull out which ones you're embedding. If somebody says, well, actually, what makes what you're doing truly intergenerational? I've got a couple of slides following that I've just mapped them out on. And then if you need direction and support, you know, do contact GWT. It comes into a central email, and then it then goes out to the person who's best suited, and we can signpost you to the thing that we think would be most suitable, whether it's a case study, whether it's a piece of research, or whether it's appropriate training. So I think part of moving forwards and moving your own practice forward is becoming a reflective practitioner, and that's something, if you're early years based, you'll have an understanding of actually what does that look like. So you need to understand the different levels that you can be working at, and like I say, I'm not going to go through these, but other than to say that sort of stage 1 would just be learning about an intergenerational group and not meeting, and then you move through to stage 7 where you have an intergenerational community, where the intergenerational learning and principles and quality standards are really firmly embedded in the organisation structure. You know, and Apple and Honey, Nightingale and Judith are a great example of that. But we need to know, you know, you need to be aware of the levels, and then equally you need to be aware of the quality standards and what do they look like, because for each of us working in different professions, the standards may look slightly different, but fundamentally they should exist, and they should be a journey around embedding them as part of what you're trying to do. Just to say here that the diploma, if you go on and do the GWT diploma, takes a really good look at the quality standards and breaks them down around actually what would they look like in terms of practice. Now, I mentioned before about the importance of being a reflective practitioner, and if you're from early years, you'll know that I have absolutely stolen this. It's an early years reflective cycle, but it works so well for intergenerational practice as well, in terms of planning it, doing it, observing it, assessing it in terms of evaluation and monitoring, and then reviewing and sharing it. And we need to start thinking more methodically around how can I, if I'm working at this level, how do I then move on to that next level? How can I then embed this particular quality standard? And equally, it's also around having that understanding so that should you be asked, you know, what aspect of your practice is intergenerational, you're then able to pull out the key things that highlight the difference between your practice being intergenerational or just multi-generational. And I think the important thing to add here is I'm doing some work with the Care Inspectorate around helping inspectors to understand what does intergenerational work look like. We did the same in England, working with Ofsted and the Care Quality Commission, because when they're coming in to make judgments, they equally felt that they needed that information around what does good quality, what does best practice look like, so that they could ask the right questions to drill down and make a decision as to whether it was there or not. So being a reflective practitioner is so important, and you never reach that stage where you're truly happy with where you're going, because you're just constantly wanting to be moving it on. And then the fourth thing was around monitoring evaluation. And I mentioned before that it tends to be, in my experience, something that people are hesitant about, don't feel terribly confident about, and always, if they've got the option, would rather seek and find funding for it to happen externally. And I think we need to, do some self-reflection around actually what could I do to become better at evaluation? What would it look like? What tools could I use? How can I build the confidence? Because when within an intergenerational project, it should be all the stakeholders that are involved in monitoring and evaluation. It shouldn't be left to the project manager. It needs to belong to all of us, and we need to own it in the same way that we own the intergenerational project as it is. But we might need to do some training on it if we're project managing, so that people are comfortable and confident in knowing what they're looking for. Monitoring and evaluation enables us to assess what we're doing and share our findings. It then attracts funding, which for a lot of projects, is the thing that makes the difference between them happening or not. Because for so many of us, intergenerational work is hard to be sustainable without that funding. And sustainability often doesn't come until you've got that total organisation, acceptance, and working with an intergenerational approach. It highlights and evidences the impact upon the participants and the community. And by virtue of doing that, it brings the community tighter together. It will reflect your aims and outcomes. Did they go well? And sometimes things don't go well. And often I know when I'm writing a funding bid, I'm going to put in all that good stuff because I want to attract the money. But we're really now at that stage of, developing a new field of working, that we need to be honest, and we need to be saying, well, actually, when I did this, this didn't go so well, but this is what I would do differently to make sure that didn't happen again. We've just finished a project in Torbay, an 8-week distanced project, and we've made sure within our evaluation that we've put in the negatives as well as the good stuff, because it is so important. And then we know that monitoring evaluation attracts attention when we share it. So in terms of sort of what's happening, so there are lots of things happening within GWT. I've talked about the training that's there. I've talked about the support that's available for intergenerational practitioners, and really the responsibility for ourselves, if intergenerational work is if you want that to make your field, is how can we start to network and create our own network of intergenerational practitioners. We're developing a pathway within GWT for young people particularly, and children. So I've just finished an exciting piece of work that we're doing alongside the Scouts organisation, and we've just written an intergenerational 6-week project that will be running out in Scotland in Scouts, so that all children will experience intergenerational work outside of school, because if it's outside of school, it often tends to have more meaning because the children have chosen to give their time to it. We also have those networks, and we also have events such as Global Intergenerational Week in April, which is a great time to be sharing and shouting about what you're doing. And then there are new things happening as well, which I can't allude to, but I'm going to share now with Judith, and she can share what's going on in her world as well. Let me just stop sharing. Right, Judith, you should be fine to share.
Thank you very much, Lorraine. Lorraine has presented an amazing overview of intergenerational work, but not just around the benefits. She's demonstrated the difference between dabbling in this area and having a full understanding of the field. Intergenerational work is complex. It's not just a feel-good exercise. It can only exist within relationships, and relationships are complicated, they're complex and need sensitivity, and to be managed reflectively and with expert understanding. I mentioned before, my own intergenerational journey began nearly 30 years ago. Personally, I never had grandparents. I hadn't realized what I had missed until I married into a family where I gained a grandma. And that was when I realized, when I opened my own small nursery in South London, that it was really important for the children to have a holistic education experience of life. And it wasn't enough for them just to be relating to each other and interacting. They had to actually be relating to people throughout all the phases of life. And so we started visiting a care home in South London, initially just on occasional visits, and then those visits grew, and I saw the relationships and just how deep they were, what a difference they made, both to the residents and to the children, and also to everybody around. And I approached the home and asked if I could actually open a nursery on-site, co-located, where we could have intergenerational activities and programs every day. And they said yes. So in 2017, we opened Apples and Honey Nightingale. Anyway, and I would like now to share my screen with you. Thank you. Share screen. Share screen. It says that I can't. Now I can. Thank you. So, right. Right. Thank you. So anyway, I decided that, having had the experience of actually implementing a program and seeing just how amazing the benefits were, that the only way that intergenerational work could be fully embedded in both the education and the care system throughout the UK was by having an accredited qualification in intergenerational care and education. And I know Generations Working Together has been working towards this for many years. I'm delighted to be working with them on this. In fact, I am a graduate of their excellent IDOL course, and I can recommend it highly. I encourage you to take it if you can. As I'm sure you are aware, both early years and the care system are low status and poorly paid sectors. Carers and educators have such responsible jobs, but their fields are not seen as being professions, and there is no recognized career pathway to encourage care homes and other organizations in the care sector to invest in intergenerational practice. So in January this year, Apples and Honey Nightingale Education and Training Centre gained accreditation as an NCFE centre to deliver NCFE and cash approved courses. We are in the process of preparing a suite of qualifications in intergenerational work to be approved by cash and hope to start delivering them in the autumn. So I just wanted to share what our framework for the course is going to be. We're going to have 7 units. The first unit will be understanding the principles and processes of intergenerational work. Then we will learn more about the difference between intergenerational and multi-generational and the basic understandings of the definitions. We'll also have an opportunity to experience it by visiting, I hope, linking people from different areas of the country together with organizations that are delivering intergenerational activities. And that's why, again, repeating what Lorraine has said, this is not something that any of us can do alone. This is where everybody can be working together, sharing their expertise, being part of this particular movement towards the field of intergenerational work, so that it becomes an understood area of responsibility for all. The other area, the next unit will be about understanding dementia and other age-related conditions. The third unit will be on understanding child development and statutory guidance for schools. The fourth would be understanding and assessing the risks of intergenerational work. And the fifth unit will be observation, assessment, and evaluation in intergenerational work. I'm going through these very quickly because I know there's not a lot of time, and we won't have time for question and answers. And also, it's not yet prepared, but hopefully we have the framework, and hopefully we'll be able to roll this out in the autumn. The sixth unit would be on volunteers and teamwork. As Lorraine said, this isn't just about the participants from whatever age group. This is about everybody involved. And then the final unit would be a practical one to draw all the elements together. Because what are our ultimate aims? We want intergenerational work to be a respected and valued field of expertise. We want the intergenerational lead to be a recognized position of responsibility that's financially rewarded, that has respect and is considered to be as crucial as the safeguarding lead. We want more experienced educators and carers to be attracted to train as intergenerational leads. The growth in intergenerational projects will result in more research on the impact of high quality intergenerational work for all involved. We want the growth in high quality evidence-based research to encourage more educations and care settings to employ intergenerational leads in their settings. And we want growth in high quality evidence-based research on the benefits, not only personal and emotional, but also social, financial, that those will encourage policymakers to prioritize intergenerational models nationally and internationally. We would like, our aim is that all education and care settings will have a qualified member of staff with responsibility for intergenerational work, just as they have members of staff with responsibility for health and safety, for therapeutic and developmental aims, and that it will be considered to be totally embedded within all intergeneration, within all care settings, and not just settings, but all care organizations that work with our older members, and also in all education settings. And whilst my expertise is very much with early years, I'm hoping that we'll be able to actually adapt our units to go through the whole age spectrum, so that we will be able to ensure that intergenerational work will carry on throughout all the ages. And I just thought a picture is always nice to have at the end to show how intergenerational can be really can be a cohesive element, can bring society to a better place and bring joy and happiness. Thank you. And if you'd like to know more, please do get in touch. I'd be very happy to share. And if you look at our website, hopefully we'll be able to update you on how we're getting on in launching our course. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Judith. That's very exciting news. And intergenerational qualification in early years in care, I think that's, yeah, really exciting to bring the two fields together. thank you for sharing that, and it'll be great that it all kicks off in the autumn and ready to go. Has anybody got any questions for Judith or myself?
Hi. Is verbal okay, or do I need to put it in chat?
Yeah, no, that's fine, Matt. Thank you.
Right. I don't really have a question. Just want to say how much I love hearing all of this. And you guys covered so much, and I agree 100% with everything you're doing. It's interesting, you're a loop, you know, exploring, doing, sharing, organizing, teaching, organizing, leading, facilitating. It's really the loop of growing in the intergenerational field. You know, it's the fun part. And yeah, I feel like I'm at home. I'm usually, like many of us, you know, doing work under the covers so people don't see what we're doing. Maybe they don't understand it first. Maybe under the covers is not the right metaphor. Anyway, so it's great to be here. I love what you're doing, and I look forward to a chance to visit in person.
Yeah, do make sure you go down to Apple and Honey. It's yeah.
You would be so welcome. You'd be most welcome.
Oh, thank you so much. And I do send people your way. Vegeta,
thank you.
Well, for your training programs, the reviews are great. Yeah, it's a great certificate program, and you do the world a service, especially by offering it online. I know if I go to Scotland, I could have like haggis and stuff, but what can I have if I visit you, Judith, besides apples and honey?
Latkes. We make good chicken soup.
Ooh, that is good.
Like chicken soup and knedler.
Okay.
And if you come to Devon, it's cream teas and scones, but there's a whole world argument around whether you have jam or cream first. So we definitely haven't got time to get into that one. Can I just pick up? So Anna's just posted around the 8-week diploma. So it's accredited by the CP accreditation in Scotland, Anna. Although GWT is exploring different accreditation at the moment, so we might be able to give you some more information by that by the autumn. We're looking to different types of accreditations that will equate with the UK and also Europe. I'm just making sure I haven't missed any questions. Oh, somebody's done the diploma course. That's really great. Yes, Nancy.
Nancy, yeah.
Yeah, so Lorraine, do you think that the course, we could get a transcript that would be recognized in the United States for that?
In terms of the accreditation, do you mean, Nancy?
Yeah, just the full course, the intergenerational course that you're talking, the 8-week, I think is what you said. I was wondering because I have several people here interested in transferring credits to, I was hoping there might be some way we could do that. That might be something I have to look at here. But
yeah, I don't know. I'm going to make a note of it. I know we're looking to Europe, but I don't know how transferable that is to America and Canada. But it's certainly something we're exploring at the moment. But in terms of being able to access the diploma, it's done absolutely. It's 50 hours of learning in your own time, and as part of that, we hold webinars and chats because the students that come are from across the world. So usually we have 3 or 4 within the 8 weeks, and we try and time it so that it's not in the middle of the night in too many places, which is the biggest thing when you're working across time zones.
yeah, thank you so much.
Stephanie has asked a question. Lorraine, you can see she's wondering, you touched on the changing of the narrative, and can you say more about how we could do this on different levels, e.g. media and organizational?
I think it's around making sure that we all share what we're doing better, so that if we've evaluated it and we've got evidence and outcomes to share, regardless of what the intergenerational project or activity or program has been about, that we highlight it and make sure that it is shared. It's very difficult when you write a press release, because inevitably the press pick out the bits they want to choose, and that tends to be early years rather than maybe something with teenagers. But I think that if we're all doing a bigger variety of intergenerational work, then there will be more things to choose from. So I think it's an ongoing battle, because once you share a press release, you don't have any say in
That's what I was wondering.
how it comes across.
Yes, you've got one version and then it gets kind of twisted a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think, I think it's always worth persevering. And I think particularly Intergenerational Week in April this year is the perfect time, because there are so many. If you sign up, go up to the GWT website and sign up as a supporter, the range of organisations is really impressive already. So hopefully across the UK there will be, and I know Northern Ireland are doing loads of stuff, and Wales, there'll be a huge range of things for the press, so hopefully lots of it won't go unnoticed.
That's true. That speaks volumes, doesn't it? The amount of different as it crosses. Yeah.
And there are 11 countries engaged in Intergenerational Week this year, so it'll be really great by virtue of the fact that it's global, that it will attract more information, attract more attention.
Yeah, it's brilliant. Yeah, thank you.
There's a question from Junji asking you what do you think about, asking both of us actually, what do we think about the role of designers, product and environment in supporting intergenerational living and activities?
I would say, if you haven't signed up for Judith and our webinar, which is webinar 9 on Thursday, we're going to be looking at intergenerational spaces within the context of a care home.
Absolutely.
So you might find that really useful. And if you can't book onto it, all of the webinars will be recorded and accessible. But we're exploring the fact that we shouldn't narrow down the intergenerational connection just to the activity, because the activity is just a tool. But actually, what are we losing in the midst of having that activity as a priority? What conversations and opportunities are we missing? So I would, send you there.
And I'll just give you one example of an adaptation that we made at Apples and Honey Nightingale. I don't know if you have seen the outdoor paint boards that have got a transparent kind of perspex painting, and you can actually paint on them. And we asked an organization, it was actually just some builders that we knew, to actually adapt something for us so that instead of it being full length, it actually has it's from the legs and from the ground raised so that there's room for somebody to can actually do the painting with a wheelchair, that they can join in, they can sit and reach the perspex stream facing a child who might be at the same level as them painting. They can paint each other, they can paint together, and making sure that actually the kind of equipment, outdoor equipment as well, that we have, there are some things that can be accessed by people of all abilities and heights, and that they can work together intergenerationally. And the conversations that have come from that have been amazing.
Right, I'm just mindful of the time, and people might have other meetings. The slides will go up alongside the recording. Can I just check? I'm going to ask a question. Denise, what's happening with evaluations? Do you know? Are they being emailed out to people?
Yes, I just got a hold of the list today, so I will put it into a form and send it out probably tomorrow morning.
Brilliant. So if you can evaluate this session, we'd really appreciate it, because it all helps us plan as to maybe what we didn't cover and what we need to cover more. So thank you so much for your time. Day 1, another few more days to go. So please join us if you can. Judith and I are doing another double act on Thursday in webinar 9. So you've still got time to book onto that one if you want to. Other than that, thank you for your time and have a good afternoon.
Thank you, Lorraine.
Bye.